Awesome, thank you. I know we're probably right before lunch, so I'm gonna do something that I had to do at my first Code for America Summit, which was take 20 seconds to raise your hand or post it in the chat if you're new. Is this your first Code for America Summit? Yes? Now say hello, introduce yourself to someone new, and stand up. Just take 1 second to stretch your legs before lunch. Five, four, three, two, one. If I could have your attention again. Thank you. Thank you. So, hi everyone, my name is Quirarte, but most people know me as Angie. And I am the Federal Partnerships Director with Tech Talent Project. This is not my first summit, but the summit was actually life-changing for me a few years ago. And it is my honor to be moderating this panel with you all today. And our topic will be on diversity, equity, inclusion, and access when it comes to hiring talent in government. And I'm not sure if some of you have seen the TED Talk that Amanda did, but there's a line in her TED Talk that really resonated with me, which is you can't change or fix what you can't see, which is why it's really incredibly important that we are bringing in people and working with people and bringing diverse lived experiences, as you've probably heard in a couple of talks already today and throughout the summit, and apply our lived experience when it comes to building and designing the systems that so many people depend on. I am an immigrant of the US, and I depended on those systems. And so with me today, I have three amazing panelists that will tell you their expertise and experience when it comes to hiring and why diversity matters when it comes to hiring in government or working with government. And so first off, we have Jennifer, who is an expert in inclusion and engineering, accessibility, and design. And the first question goes on to you. So tell me, how does diversity show up in service delivery, and why is it important in hiring?
So sadly, diversity rarely shows up in the actual service delivery. The teams that are delivering are rarely representative of the people that we are serving and delivering to and for. Hopefully more with than by, if you know my usual spiel. But the nice thing, the positive, is that a lot of our federal sponsors are diverse. We do have federal sponsors who are blind, who come from every racial background, the full gamut of age and lived experience. But the people that I have had on the teams, not so much. And so if we don't have the lived experience to understand who we're building for, we need to find ways of bringing them in and changing how we hire, for example.
Yeah. So Victor, what do you think about that?
Yeah, for us, we try to use a different acronym. So instead of saying DEIA or DEAI, we say a JEDI or a JEDI. So accessibility, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And specifically, we look at equity and accessibility as things we do to reach the end, being justice. And so that means that beyond diverse hiring, beyond creating an inclusive environment, we actually have to do work. If what Alicia Menendez said is true, that we have unconscious bias and implicit bias, we have to understand that we actually can't educate ourselves out of that. If I'm pulling archetypes and stereotypes from my long-term memory and pre-attentively processing it the moment I see someone at the beginning of an interview, we actually do a lot of work to process that out of ourselves. Really great book, My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem talks about this type of work. So we do a lot of work to bring those biases to the forefront, increase our awareness of them, and hopefully reduce that so that those biases don't have such adverse effects on the delivery of the services, but also if our employees are part of the process of hiring, actually choosing who we hire when they're part of those hiring panels.
Thank you, Victor. And before we jump on to Brian, Jennifer, in past conversations, you've also brought up how it's important to think about experience, not just in terms of education and your practical experience that you've received officially, certificates and things along those lines. Can you give us an example of how lived experience is also critical when it comes to bringing in diverse talent into government? I know you have a good example.
Sure. I know that I have worked hard to try to challenge the teams that I work with to value lived experience and that as a value add, as well as a replacement for some of the usual qualifications of education, certificates and such. We had a candidate at a company I used to work at, 2019, 2020, and I thought she was really tremendous. I thought her portfolio was great. Her case studies documented the research activities. They documented the gives and the takes. She was transitioning from a career as a pharmacist. Now, if you think about what a pharmacist does in a day-to-day business, there's a lot of people management, there's stakeholder whispering, stakeholder management, there's customer service, there's dealing with a whole diverse range of people. So I thought this candidate was phenomenal. My colleagues looked at it and said, she doesn't have enough research experience in her portfolio. The only difference between this candidate and the other candidates that they were moving forward was a very ethnic name and very dark skin. So I thought she was phenomenal. I connected with her on LinkedIn and I followed her career. And thankfully, Google saw what I did and hired her. But we lost this incredible talent to the private sector that would have been invaluable to our public sector work. So we definitely need to be checking ourselves as we review candidate portfolios and resumes and second guess what we've been raised to think is valuable and think all that empathy and imagination we put into our work, put it into evaluating a candidate. And even when we're interviewing them, look for if they're nervous and see if there's something you can do to help them with their nerves so they can shine. Go into every interview going, I want to hire this person because they're going to help me, and do what you can to help them.
Thank you. I think that really also just shows not about like how intentional we have to be when thinking about hiring and recruiting, but also that you don't have to start from zero. Like you can change careers, right? Like we have to think about the people that have other experiences that really complement literally like the work that we do. So you don't have to be completely, I mean, obviously some of you will push back. Obviously you have to get some training at some point and you can learn those skills. But I think being able to validate your lived experience, such as like someone that's a pharmacist that can come in and bring in those skills and that perspective into government, and how we create and deliver and shape services and design services is really, really important. So Brian, to get to you, I know you have some thoughts around what it means to be just your turn.
I'd say I didn't really feel empowered to move the needle on DEIA until I was a supervisor in the federal government, which is definitely different than my industry experience. I feel like it was broadly communicated when there was an opportunity to engage and recruit. So I think there's definitely an opportunity in this space, specifically in the federal government, to just have that information cascade throughout the organization and allow different people within your organizations to take part. There was a great session this morning, I believe it was like Code the Dream, where they had a slide that said like, rethink your power. And I think there's a lot of best practices that are being discussed today, a lot of information being shared, and there's an opportunity here to rethink how you're involved in that DEIA conversation and what is it that you've taken from, let's say, CFA that you can bring to your manager or to discuss with your HR partner to sort of move the needle. But one of the things I'm doing to try to counter that is there's a lot of people with energy in this space right now. It may not be a formal structure, but people across nonprofit industries, state, local, federal, that want to move the needle and trying to figure out, hey, what's something that we can do to sort of help, whether it's an open source tool for HR. I think their roles are often focused on administrative and compliant, but how about the relationship building and the different communities out there that they could reach out to share their job posts? So there's got to be ways to help.
Yeah. I think as Jen Palka mentioned this morning, it's been 10 years and we have so many lessons learned. And you all are the next chapter of what that means. I think that the theme of obviously the summit is building the pack forward together, and how can we collectively shape the ecosystem. I think it's changed for me in the sense of when I first came to my Code for America Summit, my first one, it wasn't as diverse as it is right now. And I just want to take a second to acknowledge that and recognize that all of whoever you're sitting with or whoever you're chatting with already online, it really shows the progress of the movement over the years. And I think we have so much opportunity to build from this. And I'm just so excited to have you all here, to have folks online, and to be having this conversation with you all. So I'll jump to our second question. So the Tech Talent Project is actually working on a set of customer experience reports and in partnership with the Partnership for Public Service. And one of those reports is highlighting federal hiring data. And one of the numbers that stood out to me was that less than 1% of the federal IT workforce is under 30, and over 50% is over 50. Yes, take a second. Don't freak out. Actually, do freak out. Yes, do freak out. Yes. And I think what that says is like we've been focusing on the urgent because this work naturally pulls you in during crisis. But we need to be intentional and really focusing on also just what's important. We need to build the bench. You're all part of that bench, so let's build the bench. What are we doing to build the bench, Jennifer?
So I'm really glad that we followed Alicia Menendez this morning, or not so long ago, and I just bought her book because what I'm mostly doing is having a lot of uncomfortable conversations and raising issues that people maybe haven't thought of before and really don't like to talk about, like discussing the diversity that was actually on the interview panel, for example. Was it nothing but white, abled men? Who were we interviewing? A young Korean American man. How do you think that might have felt? What should we do differently? How can we, are we representing our company culture? Probably. What should we learn from the fact that we did this? I think the other part is I make sure that I am constantly mentoring, and I do try to be intentional about choosing people that aren't establishment status quo, but I open it up to everyone because so many were good to me as I was learning. I'm authentic and transparent about my lived experience, including I'm a survivor, and I'm Black, Native, Mexican, and white. I have invisible disabilities. Stop with the stigma, stop with the silencing and erasure. We all have things that make us unique, and that we can bring to the work because we are helping people, we are serving people like us. The other part is I document statistics because data helps my stakeholders and leadership understand what I'm saying. So I take like 45 minutes a week, collect a bunch of different data, and make sure I have it at the ready for those conversations. We also need to make sure that we're doing more like Code for America is hiring a UX research apprentice. So what can we do to hire more younger people instead of just the contracts that say you must have SMEs with this much experience and this, that, and the other thing. We also need to be hiring apprentices, particularly those with lived experience, like you mentioned that you grew up with the public, was it the service benefits?
Yeah,
Social safety net. Like that is that is invaluable experience for this work. I grew up as a military brat. It's invaluable experience.
Yeah. As an immigrant, like you grow up and you have to learn how to translate complicated government forms to your parents. So I definitely relate to that. Victor, what about you? What are we doing to build a bench?
Yeah, I have a friend named Mansi Gupta who distinguishes between design by women and design for women. And I think what she's trying to get at is, these concepts like whiteness it's not just a color, patriarchy isn't just a gender, capitalism isn't just an economic system. So both white and non-white people can act in ways that reinforce whiteness, right? Men, women, and non-binary people can act in patriarchal ways, domination, subjugation, hierarchy, et cetera. And faith-based institutions, academic institutions, nonprofit social enterprises can act in ways that reinforce our capitalist understandings of this world. And so one of the ways that we build the bench is to keep the bench from leaving, right? And when people see that we actually do this work to bring this to the forefront and educate all of ourselves, not just mentally, but in how we act and behave in the world, it's a powerful thing for people. Number two, we do a lot of work specifically in bringing DEIA metrics into the measurement of the employee experience. As a service designer, I work on both the customer experience side and the employee experience side, and we feel that our employee experience metrics are deficient if they don't involve DEIA metrics. We should be able to measure the experience of particular underutilized communities and groups in our employee community. And number three, I have the wonderful privilege of being able to practice participatory design, specifically radical participatory design, and one of the ways that we know participatory process is truly radical, truly participatory, is when we see a shift in power amongst the members of the research and design team that comprise the community, as well as professional designers and developers. And I'm beginning to see that people actually gain skills by doing this process, and they get jobs, and they're offered jobs either with us or they take that into other places. So that's another way that we begin to build out the bench as people gain skills. And they don't have to. Maybe that's not their vision of the good life, but if it is, gaining those skills through that participatory process allows them to move into other opportunities.
Thank you. Brian?
These are tough acts to follow, but I'd say there's a couple things that I'm looking at right now in regards to building the bench. The first, I'm on the board of an organization called Govern for America that are working with recent college graduates to place them in fellowships in public sector. So trying to magnify their efforts, especially amongst state and local. The second is there's a great program, I believe, that launched this year. They actually have a booth out front, the Digital Corps, the GSA. Super excited about them and how they're bringing in new talent into civic tech sector. So that's great. But also in the federal agencies where I've been a supervisor, I've been a big supporter of internships. Here at FDIC, we have paid internships, so that's great. I think I just heard the White House is doing paid internships for the first time now, so the needle is definitely moving. Also a big supporter of some of the early career rotational programs that are going across the federal government as well, but trying to find those opportunities to increase exposure as it pertains to civic tech. Also looking to volunteer. Public interest technology is a big phrase too. I think a lot of us grew up on civic tech, but public interest tech is a big one now across a variety of colleges and universities. So I'm actively looking for ways to plug in there just to increase exposure and add some representation.
One thing I forgot to mention before when I did say I was mentoring is Coding It Forward is actively recruiting for mentors right now. So everybody that has any time to give this week, the applications will close on Friday, so go to Coding It Forward, sign up to be a mentor, please. We all have something to give to one another, and think about it. How did you get to where you are today? And I bet you can name at least 3. I can name more than I have hands for.
Yeah.
So give back what was given to you.
Awesome. I bet you if I throw a rock, not because I want to throw you rocks, but I bet you if I throw a rock in the audience, I'll find a former fellow somewhere. Like fellowships work. Back in the day, Code for America used to have fellowships too, and now you see a lot of those former fellows serving in leadership positions. So definitely make sure that you support those type of programs, your early career, your mid-career programs, like Coding It Forward, like the Digital Corps, like the Presidential Innovation Fellows applications opened up this week. If you didn't hear it already, now you're hearing it again. And so, yes, our call to action really is sign up, volunteer, meet new people. You are building that next ecosystem, the next phase of this movement and this work. And it's really validating to see that it's not just the civic tech bubble, but we're really thinking about how do we reach to those that are not already part of this conversation like your hiring managers, your electeds, your other leaders, your procurement officers, everyone that's involved in the process of delivering government services. What are we doing to reach out to them to bring them into the space so that we can collectively build that ecosystem and support the next phase of this work? Thank you for your time, and this wraps up our panel. Yeah.